Good afternoon, everyone. It's Mrs. Melanie. Now, we can't go to Twinkle Kids, but I thought until we head back to Twinkle Kids, I would read you a new story every day. So we're going to start with this Mother Goose Fairy Tales book, and we'll just start with page 1 today. So today is Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there was a king and queen who lived in a great castle in a far country. They had a newborn daughter whom they loved very much. The king sent messengers to all the fairies in the land, inviting them to become godmothers to the little princess, so that they may each bestow on her a gift, as was the custom of fairies in those days. On the day of the christening, 7 fairies, all that the messengers could find, arrived at the castle. The king presented each of them with a golden casket filled with precious jewels. Just then, the curtains at the door were flung wide open. An old fairy burst into the room. She was Carabosse, whom everyone had believed to be long dead. She felt insulted for not having been invited and was absolutely furious. The youngest of the fairies, the Lilac Fairy, hid herself behind the curtain so that she might speak last after Carabosse. Then each fairy came forward in turn, waving her wand over the little princess, granting fabulous gifts for her future happiness and well-being. As the Lilac Fairy was still in hiding, it was now the turn of Carabosse. She hovered menacingly above the cradle as she uttered her terrible gift to the infant. "You will prick your finger on a spindle and die." With that, she disappeared in a puff of smoke. Everyone was horrified to hear this dreadful curse. "Fear not," cried the Lilac Fairy as she came out of hiding. "She will not die. I have no power to undo all of Carabosse's spell, but when the princess pricks her finger, she will merely fall asleep for 100 years, after which a king's son will come and wake her." In the hope of avoiding the wicked old fairy's terrible prediction, the king solemnly decreed that no one may keep a spinning wheel or spindles anywhere inside the castle on pain of death. For the next 16 years, all was well. Then one day, while she was exploring the castle, the young princess climbed a staircase she had not seen before. At the top was a room in which an old woman sat at her spinning wheel. She had not heard the king's decree. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "I am spinning, my dear," she answered, not recognizing the beautiful young girl on account of her poor eyesight. "Oh, please let me try," cried the princess, and, whether through haste or the old fairy's curse, no sooner had she touched the spindle than she pricked her finger on it and fell back in a swoon. The old woman cried for help, and people rushed to the tower from all corners of the castle to try to wake the princess. But try as they might, nothing would revive her. The king knew that the curse of Carabosse had come to pass. He had the princess taken to the finest room in the castle, where she was laid in bed. She looked like an angel as she lay there, with her eyes shut, breathing softly. The king commanded that she be allowed to sleep in peace until the hour of her awaking. The Lilac Fairy was in another kingdom 1,000 leagues away when she heard the terrible news. She wanted to help the princess, so she got in her chariot, drawn by a fiery dragon, and arrived at the castle within the hour. She was greeted by the king himself, who told her what had happened. She saw how lovingly the princess was cared for, but wanted to be sure that she would not be alone when at last she awoke from her slumber. So this is what she did. She went around the castle, and with a touch of her wand, she cast a sleeping spell over everyone she saw, except the king and queen. The ladies and the gentlemen, the guards, the pages, the cooks, and the maids, the grooms, the horses, the guards, the dogs, and even little Mopsy the puppy who lay on the bed of the princess. The very moment she touched them, they each fell fast asleep and would not wake again until the princess did, so that they would be there ready to serve her when she awoke. This was all but a moment's work for a fairy. With suddenness in their hearts, the king and queen finally left the castle, having first issued an order forbidding anyone to go near it. As if to obey this, almost immediately there grew up such a forest of trees, thorns, and brambles around the castle with branches so tightly entwined that neither man nor beast could possibly pass through. And so the Lilac Fairy's work to safeguard Sleeping Beauty was done. After 100 years had passed, a young prince came hunting in that part of the country. When he asked about the turrets he saw rising above the forest, some people told him that the castle was haunted, and others said it belonged to an ogre who ate children. Then an old farmer spoke. "Sir, it has been told that a beautiful princess lies there asleep, and that she would sleep for 100 years until a king's son came to wake her." The farmer's story so intrigued the prince that he was determined to get into the castle, one way or another. But as he approached the impenetrable wall of trees and brambles, to his astonishment, they parted to let him pass. The prince now saw the great castle looming ahead of him, and glancing back, he was surprised to find that his companions were no longer with him, for the trees had closed up again as soon as he had come through. Walking on, he entered the castle. He came through the dark gatehouse and found himself in the courtyard of the castle, where he came upon a terrible sight. All around lay the bodies of the men and animals, all of them apparently dead. A fearful silence reigned over their sorrowful scene. Then the silence was broken by the sound of snoring. It came from the guards who stood by a doorway, leaning on their halberds, but with their eyes closed and asleep. The prince now realized that the people and the animals were also not dead, but sleeping. Inside the castle, he saw that every room was filled with sleeping people, some standing, some sitting, but all fast asleep. Then he came to a bedroom. On the great bed, he saw a beautiful young princess lying asleep. The prince fell immediately in love, and he bent down and kissed her lips. The enchantment was thus broken at last, and Sleeping Beauty opened her eyes. "Is it you, my prince?" she asked sleepily. "I have waited for you for so long." Everyone else in the castle woke up too, and set about what they had been doing when they had fallen asleep 100 years before. The fires in the kitchen sprang back into life, and the cook swiftly prepared a great feast for all, which was just as well because everyone was famished after such a long sleep. Sleeping Beauty was now wide awake and joined the celebration on the arm of the prince. He did not say that her clothes were 100 years out of fashion. She looked no less beautiful for all that. Sweet music struck up as they sat down to dine. After the feast and dancing, everyone went to the chapel of the castle, where Sleeping Beauty was married to her prince at last, and they lived together in the castle happily ever after. Now, today's story is finished. Join me back again tomorrow for the next.